Now let's talk about handling exceptions. First, we're going to use the try catch blocks, and then we're going to use 3 blocks: try, catch, and finally. Okay, we're back to Eclipse, and what we're going to do now is we're going to handle exceptions. Okay, good. I am going to remove this exception I was throwing myself, and I'm going to get back to code where there's no exceptional event happening, and I'm going to run this code. Okay, now suppose we want to handle exceptions when they occur rather than have the JVM do the default handling. Then what we would do is we would enclose the block of code where we expect the exception to happen. For instance, I expect this line might get the exception since I can divide by 0 here. I'm going to say try, and I will put this try statement around that block of code, and I would do the optional indent, but it looks better when you indent. Okay, now I have enclosed this section in a try block, and then I have to have a catch block to handle exceptions. Okay, now the catch block has to state what type of exception it handles. We've already seen that exception themselves are objects of particular classes. Okay, so the after the catch block, we will indicate what type of exception we want to catch. In this case, I am going to catch array. Okay, and within the catch block would be the code I would want to execute if there is an error. Okay, suppose what I want to do is within this catch block, I want to say I want to print something out. Okay, I am going to define X outside of the try block, and initialize it. Okay, now I'm overwriting this value within here. Okay, now I'm going to run the code, and it gives us a result of 5. Now let me try by doing a divide by 0. And now, instead of the program crashing, I get this error message. Okay, and I get this printout of X. Now, if I don't want this printout of X, in this case, I would put this here. Okay, so now if I run this, I get this error message, and if there's no error, say 5 divided by 1, and I run, I get my result of 5. Okay, Okay, let's do another example. This time we're going to ask a user to input a number and then see what exception happens when they input a string that cannot be converted to a number, and then we will handle that exception ourselves. Okay, good. Let's import scanner. Okay, so we are having the user enter a number, and then we are printing out twice the number you entered is, and print out 2 times that number. Okay, so we're going to run that, and I am going to enter 5, and it gives me a result of 10. Okay, now I am going to run the program again. Let's say someone made a mistake, and instead of entering 5, they typed in F5VE. Okay, and there you will notice we get default exception handling from Java, from the JVM. Okay, and the particular exception we're having this time is an input mismatch exception. Now we can handle this exception ourselves by putting a try block around the code that can cause the exception. I'm going to put a try block here, and I'm going to select these and press the tab key to indent. Then I'm going to create a catch block that should execute if the input mismatch exception should happen. So I have imported input mismatch exception, and you might have noticed, by the way, when we had an arithmetic exception, I didn't have to input it. I didn't have to import it. It's because it's in Java lang. Okay, and classes in java.lang are implicitly imported. Okay, now what I want to do is I am going to tell the user okay, now I am going to run this, and first I am going to run with an actual integer, say 7, and it gives me the result I expect, and I'm going to run it again, and now I'm going to say SEVEN, and it says you did not enter an integer. Now an even better way I could handle this error is I could give the user the opportunity again to enter an integer, rather than just saying you did not enter an integer and stopping at that point. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use a loop to do precisely that. Okay, now I'm going to create a Boolean variable going to give the value of false. Okay, and I am going to say while not done, or I could, let's change it to, okay, let's leave it that way, while not done. I think in Java it should be this. Okay, and then I am going to try, and I am going to indent all of these. Okay, what this means is if done is false, and then it gets inverted here to true. Okay, while not done, we're going to keep trying. Okay, good. Now we want, when we have actually gone through without an exception, we change done to true. Okay, so the program stops working at that point, and we're going to run it, enter an integer, let's say 8, there, it's done. Okay, and we're going to run it again, enter an integer, let's say 4, well, FOUR. Okay, we have entered an endless loop, so I am going to break that. Okay, the reason why we entered into an endless loop was there was still something in the input buffer. Okay, so what we're going to do is, when there's an exception, we're going to clear the buffer, and one way of doing that is we're going to say we're going to call the next method of the input reader. Okay, so I'm going to run this again, and let's say FIVE, and there it asks us again to enter an integer. Okay, and if I should enter 5, it gives me the answer, and we're done. So we have used the try catch blocks such that if someone were to enter text that would cause an exception, we would handle the exception, and we would fully recover by asking the user to enter the input again. Okay, now let's change this example slightly so that we have a situation where more than one exception is possible. Okay, we're going to talk about different types of exceptions now. Okay, now instead of twice the number, let's say 100 divided by your number okay. I am going to run this, and we have 100 divided by your number is 20. Okay, on putting an input of 5. Great. Now I'm going to run it again. I am going to put a 0. 0 is an integer. Okay, and then I'm going to press the enter key. Now we get our old friend, the arithmetic exception. Okay, Now you'll notice it's not caught by the input mismatch exception because the catch block we have will only catch input mismatch exceptions, or if we create subclasses of input mismatch exceptions. Okay, so now this is what we're going to do. Now we're checking for input mismatch exceptions, and we can check for other exceptions as well. Okay, good. So we're going to write another catch block. Okay, and then we're gonna do a different print statement. Okay, great. Now we're going to test this again. Again, we're gonna enter a 0, and now you'll notice we get caught by the arithmetic exception. Now in this case, since an actual integer was entered rather than text, we don't need to clear the buffer, which it should have been cleared. Okay, now let me try it again. Control let's say 0. Okay, now I have to enter an integer again, 5 and 7. Okay, so these are the 3 conditions. Okay, good. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is, suppose there's something we want to happen for each try. Okay, meaning whether the try was successful or whether we caught an error or not, we still want that thing to happen. Then if that's what we want, we would add a finally block. Okay, whatever is within this finally block will happen whether a try goes through without an exception or whether we do catch one of these exceptions. Okay, suppose we want to keep track of how many trials there have been. Okay, meaning how many times the user has tried to enter a number. Okay, let's see, let's say tries, and we're gonna put a default value of 0s for tries. Okay, now we will check whether it's done. Okay, and in this case what we're going to do is we're going to increment tries. Yeah, okay, so finally we're going to say okay, this is what we would want to show if it's actually done. Okay, so we're gonna say if done, and then do this. Okay, else we're gonna say okay. Now we wanna pre-increment twice. Okay. Now I am going to try this out. Okay. Now I am going to try out the input mismatch error. So I'm gonna say 5. So it says not yet done 1 attempt. Okay. I'm gonna enter a 0 for the arithmetic exception. It says not yet done 2 attempts. Okay. Now I'm gonna enter say 2 and it gives me the result and then done with 3 attempts. Okay, so you'd notice irrespective of whether we went through a catch or not, we went through the code that was within the finally block. Great.